King. In other words, Hua Huan is a native of Shaanxi province. My father was a county captain. He died a long time ago, the youngest child in his family. Hua Huan was brilliant and was called a child prodigy when he was 11 years old. But Mr. Huo's mother loved him so much that she never let him out of the house that she was 13 and unable to tell his uncle from his nephew. There's a judge in the same village who likes Taoism and doesn't come back to the mountains. Mr. Wu has a daughter named Qing'e, 14, who was born into the perfect beauty. When I was a child, I read my father's books and I envy Xianghe. Ever since her father went to the monastery, she's determined to marry no one and her mother has no choice but to take her. One day, Mr. Huo saw Miss King outside her home, and although he was a child and knew nothing about her, he felt very fond of her, but could not express it. When I got home, I told my mother to go talk to my matchmaker. Knowing that King would like to marry no one, her mother felt it was difficult and Hua Huan was disgruntled all day. My mother, afraid that her son might get sick, asked others to pick up relatives in Wujia, but Wujia refused. Mr. Huo thinks about it all the time. He can't think of anything. This day, a Taoist priest was outside, holding a small shovel a foot long. Mr. Huo borrowed it and looked at it, saying, "What's the use of this stuff? It's a tool for digging out medicinal materials. Don't look at it. It's small enough to be shoveled in with hard stones." The Taoist replied. Ho Huan doesn't believe it. The Taoist each chopped off the stones on the wall, which fell with him, like chopping tofu. Mr. Huo was so surprised that he held them in his hand and loved them. The Taoist said, "If he likes it, I'll give it to you." Hua Huan was so happy. He was paid to thank him, and the Taoists each left without paying him. Mr. Ho Huan took the shovel home, tried it a few times on the masonry, and chopped it up without any effort. He thought, if you dig a hole in the wall, you won't see the muse's beauty. But I didn't know it was illegal. In the dead of night, Mr. Huo climbed out of the wall, came all the way to Mr. Wu's house and dug through 2 walls before reaching the main courtyard. Seeing the light in the cabin, I peeked in the window and only saw Qing'e taking off her makeup and clothes. In a moment, the lights went out, and there was silence. Ho Huan went through the wall and King was asleep. He gently took off his shoes and crept onto the bed. Fearing to wake King up again, King will be scolded and kicked out. She will lie next to Qing'e's quilt secretly, and smells the scent of the woman slightly. I didn't know he was too tired to dig a hole in the wall in the middle of the night to fall asleep. After waking up, King heard a breath, opened her eyes, and saw bright light coming through the chiseled wall hole. She scrambled, gently unplugged the door latch and knocked on the window to wake the girl and her mother, lighting a torch together and bringing a stick to the bedroom. I saw a miner and slept in bed. Take a closer look, and I know it's Hua Huan. His maids woke him up. Mr. Huo buzzed. His eyes swelled like meteors, as if not terrified, but shyly silent. The maid said he was a thief, frightened him, scolded him, and he cried, "I'm not a thief. It's because I love Miss so much. I want to see her beautiful face." People suspect that a couple of walls have been cut through, and that a kid can't do it. Ho Huan pulls out a shovel and explains its singular purpose. Everyone tried it together, surprised and scared, thought the fairy gave it to him to tell the lady. King looked down and contemplated, as if she didn't want to. The maids knew what Qing'e meant, and they all said, "This man's reputation should not tarnish the lady, so let him go back and let them support the matchmaker. Tomorrow, tell madam about the robberies last night." How about that? Qing'e didn't say anything, so the maids told Hua Huan to go. Huo asked for his shovel, and the maids laughed and said, "Stupid boy. You can't forget the murder weapon." When Hua Huan saw King with a beam of flowers beside her pillow, she secretly put them in her sleeves, but she was seen by her maid and told her in a hurry that King did not speak and was not angry. "Don't say he's stupid," said one mother, slapping Mr. Huo's neck. "Just pull him and still let him get through the wall." When he returned home, Hua Huan dared not tell his mother, only telling her to ask another matchmaker to pick up a child at Qing'e's house. Unable to resist, her mother enlisted matchmakers everywhere, eager to marry her son. After Qing'e knew about it, she felt anxious and panicky, and asked her confidants to reveal the win to Huomu. Huomu is very happy, and the matchmakers go to Wu's house to say hello. Mrs. Wu felt humiliated and angry that a little maid had leaked the other night. When the matchmaker arrived, she was even angered by the cane she poked on the ground, hurling too much abuse at Mr. Huo and his mother. Fearful, the matchmaker fled back and told Huo the details. Mr. Huo's mother was also angry, saying, "How could I be so rude to me now that I'm still in the dark about what my disgraced son did? When they sleep together, why don't you kill the slut?" Ever since Huo met with the family, she's been promoting this. When Qing'e heard about it, she was ashamed to death. Mrs. Wu regrets it too, but can't forbid Homer from telling her. Qing'e secretly asked someone to tell Huo gently, and swore that she would marry Huo Huan and not others. King was so sad to say that Huo was moved to stop saying that. But the relatives of the two families stopped talking about it. At that time, Qin Zugong was a county commander in this county. The article about meeting Huo Huan was very good and very important to him. He's been called to the county office. He's been very popular. One day, Huo Huan was asked by the county governor, "Are you married?" Mr. Huo replied, "No, I had an engagement with the daughter of the late Mr. Wu's appraiser before, but then it ended because the two families were separated." Mr. Huo said. Xiangling asked, "Would you still like to marry her?" Huo Huan, "I'm sorry, I didn't say anything." Your lordship said, "I will definitely do this for you. I'll entrust the county captain and the instructor to present gifts to Wu's family." Mrs. Wu is happy. The wedding is done. After New Year's, marry your daughter-in-law. As soon as she entered the house, King threw a shovel on the floor and said, "Take back what this thief used. Don't forget the matchmaker." Mr. Huo said with a laugh, "Cherish it and never leave." King is kind and taciturn. I see my mother-in-law 3 times a day. And the rest of the day, I just sit in my study and don't pay much attention to family matters. My mother-in-law sometimes goes out for red and white work, and she's very thorough and organized. After more than a year, she gave birth to a son named Mengxian. Miss King assigned the baby to her mother's care, as if she didn't care. 4 or 5 years later, Qing'e suddenly told Huo Huan, "It has been 8 years since our marriage, but now it is going to be a long separation. What can I do about it?" When Miss Huo asked her in surprise what was going on, Miss King quietly said nothing, dressed up. "I met my mother-in-law. And then I turned around and went back inside." Mr. Huo and his mother chased her into the room and asked her that she was in bed and breathed. The mother and son were so distraught that they bought a fine coffin and buried her. Miss Huo, an aging woman, often holds her grandson to miss her daughter-in-law. "I've been sick and bedridden ever since. I don't want to eat. I just want fish soup, but there are no fish nearby, and they are only available 100 miles away." The family members and horses were sent away, and Mr. Huo was so filial and desperate he took the money to buy his own fish. Day and night, I kept going, and when I came back into the mountains, the sun had gone down. Mr. Huo froze and limped off, struggling, and then an old man came up behind him and said, "Are your feet bubbling?" Mr. Huo promised. The old man pulled him to the side of the road, knocked on a rock to catch fire, wrapped the powder in paper and smoked Huo's feet. Smoked out. Let him try to walk. Not only the feet are not painful, but the walking is more orderliness. Huo Huan thanked the old man. "Old man, what is the rush?" Mr. Huo replied that his mother was ill, and he explained why she was sick. The old man asked, "Why not marry another woman?" Mr. Huo replied, "No one was found." The old man pointed to a mountain village in the distance and said, "There's a good girl there. If you can come with me, I'll be your medium." Mr. Huo retorted that his mother was ill and had been waiting for fish to eat. The old man said goodbye and asked him to come back another day. "All you have to do is ask the old man in the village." Then he left. When Mr. Huo returns home, he cooks the fish for his mother to eat. "My mother can eat a little. She'll be sick in a few days." Huo Huan called a servant to come to the village to find the old man. Mr. Huo came to the place where he met the old man, but couldn't find the village. He was in fright for a long time, and the sun was setting. The valleys overlapped and looked and didn't look far. They climbed up the hill with their servants and looked down on them, but they couldn't see a village. I had to go down the hill, but I couldn't find my way back. Mr. Huo was burning with impatience. He was running round and fell off the wall in the dark. Luckily, there was a long platform under a few feet, and Huo Huan fell right on it. The platform was so narrow that it could fit his body, and it was so dark that he couldn't see the bottom. He was terrified and didn't dare move. And luckily, there were trees growing on the edge of the cliff, guarding him like a railing. He slowly moved his body and saw a small hole near his foot. His heart was dim and happy. He had a stone on his back and slowly wriggled into the hole. His heart was only slightly more stable. He hoped to call for help when dawn came. On rare occasions, Huo Huan walks slowly towards the star-studded bright spot in the depth of the cave. He walks about 3 or 4 miles and suddenly sees a house. There are no lights, but it's as bright as day. A beautiful woman came out of the house. Huo looked closely, and it turned out to be King. King, looking at Huo Huan, asked with surprise, "How did you get here?" Huo Huan, unable to speak, cried with her hand in his hands. King tried to persuade him to ask about his mother-in-law and son. Mr. Huo told the family story, and Ms. King wept bitterly. "You've been dead for over a year. Is this a slur?" "No, this is Xianbu," she said. "I'm not dead. It's buried. It's just a stick. You're here today. It's a fairy. I'll take him to see his father." "I saw an old man with a long beard sitting in the hall. Huo Huan went up to see you." And Qing'e said, "The Huoling is here." The old man stood up in shock, holding Mr. Ho's hand and said simply, "Son-in-law is here. Great. Should stay here." Mr. Huo tweeted that his mother wanted him back and could not stay long. The old man said, "I know too, but it doesn't matter if we go back 3 or 4 days later." He served wine and a maid puts a bed and mattress on the west hall. After Huo Huan's meal, Qing'e slept in the same bed. King said, "What kind of place is this? It can tolerate sexual disrespect." Ho Huan held her arm. Outside the window, Qing'e is even more ashamed of the laughter of her maid. The old man came in during the argument and chastised him, saying, "The vulgar bones have tarnished my cave. Go now." Huo Huan, a proud man, is now so humiliated that he turns to his face and says, "The love of a son and a daughter is inevitable. How can you spy on us as an elder? It's not hard to tell me to go, but your daughter has to come with me." The old man was so poor that he told his daughter to come with him and open the back door to give him a ride. Huo Huan just left the door, and the father and daughter closed it. When Huo looked back, he only saw the rock of cliff one, and there were no cracks. "I'm alone. I don't know where I'm going." Looking at the moon hanging in the sky, the star fighting is sparse. He has been wistful for a long time. From sorrow to resentment, shouting at the stone wall, never responding. Huo Huan is furious. He takes a shovel out of his waist and pushes to dig through the stone walls, hurling insults at the same time. I could hear someone in the stone wall saying, "Evil barrier, Huo Huanjuo." More urgent. Suddenly, the 2 doors at the bottom of the hole suddenly opened, pushing King out and saying, "Go, go." The stone walls are back together. "If I love you as your daughter-in-law, how can I treat your father-in-law like that? Where's the old Taoist? Give you this murder weapon, and you'll kill him." Mr. Huo was satisfied with Ms. Qing'e's desire to say nothing more than to worry that the road would be difficult to return home. Qing'e broke to branches, one of which each spans, and the branches were immediately converted into horses. After a short drive home, Mr. Huo had been missing for 7 days. At first, after Huo Huan lost his place with his servant, the servant could not find him and went home to tell Huo. Hom sent men to search the valley, but there was no sign of them. When I was worried, I heard that my son was coming back and greeted him with joy. And I looked up at my daughter-in-law, almost scared her to death. Huo Huan simply stated that Huo Mu preferred it. Because of her strange appearance, King asked her mother to move, fearing that someone else would know about the meeting theory. Miss Huo listened to her. The Hogs had a house in the outer counties, and they moved there on a day they didn't know. Huo Huan and King lived together for another 18 years, giving birth to a daughter who was married to a Li surname in their county. There was a pheasant in my family's thatched field that carried 8 eggs, where she could bury her mother, King told Huo. Your father and son will carry the coffin and bury their mother. My son is now a family man and can stay there and guard the graves and never come back. Mr. Huo heeded her words and returned after burying his mother. More than a month later, Ms. Meng visited her parents, who had disappeared. Ask their servants and say, go and bury the old lady, but not yet. Meng Xian's heart is clear. It's just an exclamation. Meng Xianwan is famous, but always loses in the examination room. He is 40 years old and has not yet passed the examination. Later, as Pekong, he went to Kyoto to take exams and met a 17 and 18-year-old boy in the examination room. Meng Xian loved him. Looking at his role, it said Shen Shenlin gave birth to Huo Zhongshan, and Meng Xian stared at him with astonishment. After Meng Xian told the teenager his name, Zhang Xian entered and asked him where Meng Xian came from. When my brother went to Beijing, his father told him that if he met a man named Huo in Shaanxi province in the cultural field, it would be our people, Mr. Zhang said happily. But how come our names are so close? This is my father, Meng said in surprise after asking Zhongshan's great-grandfather, great-grandfather and parents for their names. Zhang Xian doubted the age difference, and Meng said, my parents are both fairies. How can I look at their age? I told him everything I'd done. Nakagaki believed it. After the examination, the two men couldn't take a break, so they asked the servants to drive, and the brothers went home together. As soon as he entered the house, the family greeted him and said, last night, the old lady and the old lady suddenly disappeared, and the brothers were taken aback. Zhang Xian went inside to ask her daughter-in-law, who said, last night, I was drinking together. My mother said, your husband and wife are young and don't understand. Tomorrow I will not be concerned. When I came in this morning, I was silent and no one was round. The brothers listened and stomped. Nakagaki's still trying to track it down. Meng thinks it's useless. She didn't go. We won a great victory in this exam. Because my grandfather's grave is in Shaanxi, I went home with my brother. He also wants his parents to live and to inquire wherever they go, but never hear from him.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.